Right now, you probably have a mental image of cannabis. Maybe it's a neon sign in a strip mall, a plastic baggie, or a state-mandated warning label on a package. We've spent the last 100 years putting this plant in a box, labeling it a vice, a crime, or a medicine, depending on which side of the fence you're standing on. We treat it like a modern invention, a shortcut to a different headspace that you pick up on a Friday night. But that's not just wrong. It's ignorant of the deepest truth about our own evolution. Take all of that away. The dispensary, the vape pen, the legal debate. Forget everything you know about pot culture. Now, imagine you're standing on the windswept, bone-dry plains of Central Asia 10,000 years ago. You're shivering in a cloak made of matted sheepskin, your stomach is cramping from 3 days without a real meal, and the wind is sharp enough to cut through leather. You aren't looking for a good time. You are looking for a reason to keep breathing. And yet, in the middle of that brutal prehistoric fight for survival, your ancestors didn't just walk past the ditchweed growing in the scrub. They stopped. They harvested it. They dried it. And they burned it. Why? Why would a species on the absolute brink of starvation waste precious energy, time, and fire on a plant that has 0 calories? It's not food. You can't build a house out of it. It doesn't sharpen a spear. By every metric of survival of the fittest, humans who spent their time getting high should have been the first ones to go extinct. But they didn't. They thrived, and they carried this plant with them across every continent on Earth. The story of humanity isn't just a story of hunting and gathering. It's a story of a silent, sticky, green passenger that's been riding shotgun for 10,000 years. We didn't just find this plant. We built a relationship with it that goes back further than the wheel, further than the written word, and right into the very wiring of your brain. It turns out you were born to meet this plant. The only question is, what were they seeing in the smoke that we've completely forgotten?
To understand why our ancestors risked everything for this, you have to stop thinking about it like a drug deal. You have to think about it like a Swiss Army knife. People love to argue about whether the ancients were smoking hemp or pot. It's a pointless distinction because for most of history, those were the exact same thing. Look, botanically, it's all cannabis sativa. Whether it's industrial hemp grown tall for fiber to make rope, nets, and clothes, or the high-resin flower bred for its psychoactive kick, the plant is a master of adaptation. You don't need a degree in botany to see why that's a game changer. If you're living in a world where you need to tie your boots together, build a snare for a rabbit, and keep your spirits from shattering during a 6-month winter, having one plant that does all of that is like hitting the survival jackpot. It wasn't just a plant, it was a resource library. But that's only half the story. There is a deep biological hunger in the human animal to look at the world and then look at it a different way. We aren't built to be content. We are built to seek. Whether it's through fire, song, or something else, we've always been trying to push the boundaries of our own consciousness. When our ancestors discovered that this one specific weed didn't just make strong rope, but also turn down the volume on a terrified, hungry mind, that changed our relationship with reality forever. It turned a cold, indifferent landscape into a place where the human spirit could actually breathe. We didn't just find a plant, we found a way to survive the crushing weight of being human.
To find the beginning of the story, you have to look toward the steppe. Central Asia, 10,000 years ago, was a sprawling, featureless expanse of wind-battered grassland. It was a place that didn't tolerate mistakes. The climate was oscillating, flipping from deep freezes to arid, dusty heat, and the humans living there were moving constantly, following the herds. This wasn't a world of quiet contemplation, it was a world of non-stop movement. But it was also the cradle of cannabis sativa. The plant is a pioneer species. It loves disturbed soil, the kind you find after a fire or near a watering hole where animals have trampled the earth. It thrives on chaos. And here is how the discovery likely happened. It wasn't a sudden cinematic realization. It was an accident of fire. Imagine a band of early hunter-gatherers settling in a valley where wild cannabis grew thick as tall grass. They gather the stalks for fuel, or perhaps they burn a patch of brush to clear a path. Suddenly, the air changes. The thick, resinous smoke doesn't just smell like burning wood, it carries something else. A heavy, sweet, intoxicating compound that hits the senses of everyone standing downwind. For a group of people whose lives were dictated by the harshness of the physical world, that moment of altered perception had to be terrifying and divine all at once. Geneticists trace the divergence of hemp and psychoactive cannabis back to somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago in this region. This is right when humans were beginning to experiment with the very idea of agriculture. They weren't just eating the seeds, which are packed with protein and fats. They were watching how the plant reacted to their presence. They started selecting the ones that grew stronger fibers, and they started saving the ones that made them feel different. It was the first time we took control of our environment's chemistry. We didn't just survive the steppe, we started to rewrite how we experienced it.
If you want to know if these people were just eating the seeds for nutrition, you need to look at the Pazyryk burials in the Altai Mountains. This is the smoking gun, literally. Imagine you're an archaeologist digging into a frozen tomb that hasn't been touched for over 2,400 years. You cut through the permafrost, and suddenly you're not looking at a primitive caveman site. You're looking at a scene of immense, terrifying wealth. We're talking about massive burial mounds, kurgans packed with gold, intricately carved wooden ornaments, and the skeletons of horses sacrificed to accompany their masters into the afterlife. These weren't just people, these were the elite warriors of the steppe. But the real reveal is in the center of the chamber. You find small bronze braziers, and inside those pots, you don't find seeds meant to be ground into flour or turned into oil. You find charred cannabis seeds, blackened by intense, concentrated heat. Think about the engineering involved in that. To have a brazier is to have technology. This wasn't an accident. This was a dedicated ritual. Picture the room. The air is thick with the scent of burning resin, cold air pressing against the heavy hide walls of a tent, the flickering light of torches casting shadows of warriors against the furs. They aren't just sitting around. They are conducting a ceremony. They are building a smoke-filled, controlled environment to alter their consciousness. They are using fire, bronze, and biology to create a space that exists outside of their daily brutal reality. That is the emotional spike that should keep you up at night. These people, living on the razor's edge of life, weren't just getting high for the hell of it. They were sophisticated enough to build paraphernalia, vessels specifically designed to incinerate a substance so they could inhale it. They were engineers of the altered state. They understood that the mind could be tuned like an instrument, and they were willing to craft tools of metal and fire to make it happen. They weren't just surviving the ice. They were trying to transcend it. And they did it thousands of years before someone even thought to write down the word cannabis. As these nomadic tribes began to settle into the structured, rigid hierarchies of early agricultural empires, cannabis didn't get left behind. It moved into the center of the pharmacy. We see this shift most clearly as the plant travels along the arteries of the ancient world, the Silk Road. This wasn't just a trade route for silk and spices. It was a highway for ideas, technologies, and crucially, medicinal knowledge. By the time we hit the early Chinese records, the transition is complete. In the Shennong Bencao Jing, one of the oldest pharmacopoeias in history, cannabis is already codified. It's no longer just a shamanic tool for warriors in a mountain tomb. It is officially listed as a medical treatment. They were using it for everything from rheumatism to digestive issues and even for seeing ghosts, a clear nod to its psychoactive power. But look at the shift in the social landscape. When you're a nomad on the steppe, the plant is a shared ritual, a communal fire where everyone inhales together to bind the tribe against the cold. But in the city, it becomes specialized. It becomes a commodity. You have doctors, you have traders, and you have a written record of how much of this plant you need to cure a headache or settle a stomach. The pattern of human life changed. We went from the big kill and the campfire ritual to the garden, the apothecary, and the state-regulated harvest. We started domesticating the plant just as much as we domesticated wheat or cattle. It wasn't wild anymore, it was part of the infrastructure. We had taken a weed that once just thrived on the chaos of the landscape and turned it into one of the most valuable resources in the ancient world, proving that wherever humans went, our shadow companion was going to follow.